CTIA. We're a trade association based in DC. My story personally is I'm a kind of a creature of DC, policy wonk type person, and I cover all the intersections between mobility and kind of connected life economic sectors, whether it's healthcare or financial services or automotive. And Chick and his team asked us here because our members, the wireless carriers, the device manufacturers, the operating systems, are both, I think, really thrilled by the impact of mobile in a lot of these industries and the potential for it, but also really challenged as we go from kind of a somewhat insular, telecom audience to one where, mobility and mobile devices, whether they're smartphones or tablets or sensors, are really part of every aspect of the consumer experience. There was mention earlier about thinking about all aspects of what consumers and what people do. They're at work, they're on their break, they're bored, they're asleep. And as I was hearing this, I was thinking about the commonality of all of that for the way we live today is that your mobile device is right next to you. And so, in terms of, if we could go to the next slide, in terms of the forum that we have for that at CTIA, primarily we're looking and kind of here to tell the story of our connected life, audiences and issues in our most recent annual conference, Super Mobility Week. We're combining a lot of older, again, kind of more insular telecom-based events. And, this year we had a pretty interesting, coincidence of timing where day one of our conference was also in September, the Apple announcement of things like HealthKit, Apple Pay, the newest iPhone and the newest iOS. And so, we, in sort of trying to make cider from the apples, we really in real time did a lot of kind of early discussions of, these kinds of tools. And, Apple has such an amazing track record of interaction and really, it's a kind of deep loyalty to from its users. And so we're thinking through it, in these areas, how this will impact not only Apple and, the iOS ecosystem, but our industry as a whole, and the industries that we work with. And following me will be, I think, some really helpful deep dives into financial services and payments, and then automotive. But just to kind of give you a bit more context, and if we could go to the next slide. These were some of the areas where, we focused, we focused day to day and at our annual conference. And, it was interesting that Ford chose our conference to hold its first ever hackathon and make some of its APIs available to this group. They'll be kind of following up on that next week at the LA Auto Show. And, we also have a lot of I think challenges as we begin to work with the automotive industry, which has much different and much longer timelines, in terms of product development and life cycle. Adijik will be here to tell you a bit more about the impact on financial services and payments, but we're beginning to see already with the pretty strong uptick of Apple Pay subscribers and some of the reactions by other merchants who are going a different path, as you may know from news about merchants like Walmart and CVS. In terms of healthcare, it's really significant. We heard earlier today about kind of all of the opportunities available for sort of the connected and fit consumer, but we think a lot with some of our partners in public health about how to respond to kind of the opposite end of the consumer spectrum, and thinking about how do we reach people who have kind of multiple chronic conditions and are really kind of the biggest consumers of healthcare, and is it really possible through mobility to reach those folks and to have better outcomes for the the most in need and the most intense users of the healthcare system. And then we also know in an industry like an industry vertical like healthcare, there's already a pretty complex and controversial existing network of electronic health records, and that's both an opportunity, but also I think a bit of an obstacle when startups and entrepreneurs, especially, are thinking about how to access that existing trove of data in a really complex and highly regulated industry. And then finally, we look a lot at kind of the connected home and the connected city. I know later we've got someone from the city of Boston coming to explain some of the really cool things that they're doing here to provide data on kind of the living, breathing, real-time aspects of cities, and they're doing that largely through mobile devices and networks and sensors. If we could go to the next slide. As an organization and as an industry, one of the biggest realizations that we've come to over the past, I would say, 3 to 5 years is that the majority of the really transformative products and platforms are coming from outside the walls of our members. And you speak to someone from an AT&T or a Samsung, and while they're working hard to build the best networks and the best devices they can, they realize that in many ways they will live or die and succeed or fail by how sort of welcoming their products and services are to the entrepreneurs and to the startups and to the people who actually have the ideas that are going to transform a lot of these industries. And so we've, through some pretty intense work in innovation hubs like Boston and Silicon Valley and Austin and Chicago, kind of have built up a network to increase communication between our members, which can sometimes be pretty big bureaucratic companies that can be difficult to sort of find the front door to, and a lot of the startups that are innovating in the mobile space. And at Supermobility Week, we hosted these folks, and they're not often people who really have a lot of interaction with kind of telecom as an industry, but they're using the devices and all of the new device features and the operating systems. And so through that process of finding about 50 startups to come join us and do pitches and meet with some of the investor and developer mentors and relations folks that we have in our membership, we're beginning through our association to increase that line of communication and to kind of help the efforts of a lot of these companies who are also really challenged in a world where there's a lot of innovation out there, but it's kind of tough to really find the standouts. In terms of, if we could go to the next slide, please. Chick asked us for some of the big takeaways from all that we are seeing, in these areas where mobility is transforming the delivery of services and economic sectors. We see a need for a lot of more collaboration between these industries and the technology companies and the smart creatives like yourselves who have a lot of insight and knowledge into those industries and how they're working. And the proliferation of devices and thinking well beyond smartphones and tablets to connected soda bottles and connected sensors and connected potholes will create a lot of opportunities, but also challenges, and as others have said, and in actually making the data something that leads to an increase in efficiency in some cases, and also just a more fun and personal experience. And then I would be remiss as a DC wonk if I didn't also mention that there's a lot of uncertainty among policymakers in kind of these really complex spaces like healthcare and transportation and financial services, because they're kind of looking at some of these new entrants and figuring out how or whether to apply the existing policies to those entrants. And the examples that I have are, when you are using something like an iPhone or an Android smartphone to test your blood sugar or communicate with your doctor, at what point does that device become a medical device? And with Apple Pay and all of the developments that we may see from that, at what point do either the apps or the Apple technology itself, at what point does that kind of cross the line into becoming a financial institution that's subject to all of the policies that that we and our policymakers apply to those banks. So I'd like to turn it over at this point to Adija and Mark to provide a deep dive on financial services and payments, and then automotive, respectively. So Adija, thanks.